So, here's an unpopular opinion. Dark Souls 2 is my favourite Dark Souls game.
You what?
If you agree, if you feel the same way, then perfect. We can skip together through the tulip fields of mutual agreement. I can go a few minutes without having some vehement disagreement with somebody, and we can finally agree that we have enough in common to get married. If you disagree, well, honestly, that's also fine. I'm used to it. The last time I told someone that Dark Souls 2 is my favourite, they said, "Ha! I hope you enjoy your shitty omnidirectional controls." And I didn't really know what they meant, so I just said, thank you. At least see it as a fan of the game coming forwards to critically look at each boss, and isn't just going to denounce them all as Dark Souls 2 is bad, so this boss is shit. I mean, it might be a true statement, but I am going to be optimistic here. Dark Souls 2 has a bunch of solid bosses and my favourite combat feel of the 4 key Dark Souls games, Dark Souls 1 to 3 and Demon's Souls, but it has some barriers to entry that turn away many players. Mechanics wise, if you don't know about ADP, you're going to have a very difficult time. Gameplay wise, the game was so rushed, so carved up and re-spliced together throughout development that incredible leaps of logic are required to understand what's required of you, such as knowing to exhaust Lycia of Lindel's dialogue so that you can meet her at the Rotunda later, a place you would never think to visit again after your trip through the Lost Bastille. Combat-wise, so many boss fights feel so unpolished that it feels almost impossible to get through a fight without taking some silly random damage from an unrefined hitbox. But somehow, I still love it. Between the weapons and the movesets and the beautiful armor sets, to the mystique of the lore and the convoluted lay of the land, to the excellent DLCs and awesome soundtracks, Dark Souls 2 gets my vote every single time. I wish I could have seen the game they intended to make. Some of the alpha material looks like a far more ambitious project, but I like the final piece anyway. And speaking of like, please remember to drop a like and subscribe to the channel if you enjoy the ranking. I'd be really interested to hear your own favourite, easiest and hardest bosses in the comments below. As always, thank you so much for watching. You know, I don't think I'm breaking any new ground with the following statement, but I don't feel like the Royal Rat Vanguard should really be a boss fight. Shocking, I know. Just a bunch of minor enemies clogging up a room full of little obstacles to separate the aggro like toddlers running amok in a Lego-filled room. Because, well, without the statues, you know that you would be in trouble. The Royal Rat Vanguard is, in a sense, the boss, in the same way that an empty can of Diet Coke could be a nice table decoration of the Grave of Saints, a blink and you miss it area that connects the Medulla pits to the gutter, and this fight is just as forgettable as the location. You walk in your first time and get swarmed with these little rats that just hobble around in front of you, like when your cat butts at your knees in the dark and you almost trip over it. You kill a few and wait for a boss to show up, and then, oh, is that the boss health bar? Where is the boss? If you notice the rad little furball with his mohawk, then good for you. Otherwise, you just swing around until you find the right one. As soon as you've whacked him down to 0 health, all of his mates just immediately de-aggro and fuck off, as though they can't be bothered anymore. It's a weird fight, and definitely the easiest one, especially if you're using a weapon with a wide swinging animation, and then you can get about 8 of them in a single hit. I know a lot of people absolutely hate this boss, being that the Covetous Demon isn't the normal enemy gank fight of the Royal Rat Vanguard, but instead his own singular entity, and yet he is shockingly easy. I've honestly had more difficulty trying to peel the lid off of a yogurt pot, but in my defense, those things can be tenacious. Like deciding to try a new thing from your go-to takeaway only to find out you don't enjoy it as much as your usual. I don't really have any ill will against the Covetous Demon personally, but I am a bit disappointed that I paid money to have this experience. I don't really find this fight funny either. He's a grossly mutated creature, once a man, who pathetically flops around in his efforts to kill you. There's a lot of jokes I think I could make here, but I just keep typing them and deleting them. Please fill in your own blanks and imagine the kind of jokes I might be alluding to. I feel a bit sorry for him, really. Maybe it makes sense for him to be a useless sack of shit lore-wise, but I wish he was a bit stronger and had some better moves. He's a memorable fight for all the wrong reasons, and I feel really bad for him. Like a 7-year-old kid vomiting after coming last during the 100-meter dash on sports day. It's more the spectacle than the physical prowess you remember him for. It's interesting too, considering they added the hanging urns above his head that you can hit, causing them to drop down onto him and poison him. But I've never imagined anyone would need to do that. It would probably take more time to properly execute and wait out the poison than it would be to just punch him until he stops moving.
What is wrong with you? Stop it! Cut it out, man! I don't want.
I want to say that this guy was pants before I even learned his cheese, but I have to give the Dragon Rider a tiny bit of credit in the mere fact that he hits very hard for an opening boss, and definitely teaches noobs to be careful. Noobs being me, of course. I really struggled with my first attempts at Dark Souls 2, and I didn't really get it, so I died a lot, and discovered this guy whilst running on the absolute fumes of my max HP, having been killed so many times and having my HP reduced so far that a single hit from him would kill me. I eventually got him, but had to do it whilst taking no damage, which is a lot to ask from a new player. His moveset is super standard halberd fuckery, and he has no surprises. Not even the dragon that his name seems to imply he rides. Unless they meant that in a sexy way, then I guess that's on me for assuming. Beyond that though, he is pants. The trick is to stand in the doorway with your back to the boss fog, having lowered none of the platforms, and let him walk over to you slowly while you pretend to be AFK. Count to, I think 7, and then roll past him to the right. He should just spin around to attack you and fall right off the side. I guess I have a begrudging respect for him in a way, like that bitch teacher in primary school that gave you a rough time. Looking back on it, yeah, Miss Heinsohn, maybe I was a bit of a little shit, so honestly, well done to you. I really like the Skeleton Lords. The design is so metal, the lore potential is golden, and the gimmick is fairly unique across the series. It's a shame it's easier than your mum. Seriously, I struggle to even refer to these bony bros as a road bump. It's entirely possible to beat them too quickly, at which point you'll have a room of furious wheelie boys at your heels, since they each spawn about 5 smaller skeletons on death. I like to take it slowly and savour the fight. Give them all a chance to show me their movesets, so they don't feel like I didn't give them enough of an opportunity to share their abilities with me. You go, girls, I say as I scatter their bits and pieces across the arena. You guys are doing so well. The arena has 2 huge pillars in it that you can also use to dispel some of the aggro and impede line of sight, serving as really effective shields against their ranged pyromancy spells and the wheel skeletons they spawn. It's a nice touch, and it does come in really handy. It's adorable actually because they all share a single big family health bar, like stingy parents who pay for a single buffet plate to save money, and then just force everybody else to eat off it. I don't want to give Prowling Magus and Congregation too much credit, but I actually did get greedy and die here once. When co-oping with Benhart of Jugo for his set, I used a bonfire aesthetic on the Royal Camp bonfire to respawn this boss at a higher New Game Plus level. So when I came through in New Game Plus, he was at New Game Plus 2. And when I came in a New Game Plus 2, he was at New Game Plus 3, which for some reason made a really crazy difference to the damage he was doing. I was speed running through to Chancellor Welliger to get his spells for the final few trophies, and had sort of grown accustomed to just trading damage on the way, so I didn't expect this spineless little warlock weasel to come out of the woodwork and AoE me into oblivion. Regardless of my brazen stupidity, it's a stretch to actually call this a boss fight. I guess they didn't have anything else to bookend this section of the game with, so they just called in a favour and grabbed some randomers off the street. Honestly, if you're slow and careful, this fight will be finished before you know it. If it wasn't for the mighty power of the last giant's last heal, I'd probably have put him closer to first place. Seriously, the last giant is a doozy. He requires 0 blocking or rolling. You can just run around his feet like a little aggressive ant, smacking at his ankles with whatever you can grab from the lost and found bin. I guess that's a relief considering you won't have an iframe to your name by the time you meet him. And if you've kept off forums, you won't even know to level ADP to increase your iframes during rolling in the first place. His moveset is about as basic as a Daily Mail reader and twice as slow, but with this crushing stomp that he'll pull out of the bag when he's sick of you laughing at his silly hula hoop face. Honestly, this guy goes full sicko mode when he thinks you're taking it a bit too far. I've never seen anyone rip off their own arm during a fight before to use it as a huge bludgeon. That's dedication. Not to mention the fact that he's been trapped underground for God knows how long, but yanks himself free in seconds when he sees you. Yeah, I know you're angry, but come on, put some elbow grease into it. You must feel like such a mug after realizing you could have escaped this lifetimes ago. I think we were all a wee bit surprised when this fellow opened his mouth and revealed his visage to us. It's also the only part of him that takes damage, so you have to get in close and personal regardless. The Demon of Song's attacks can be surprisingly formidable if you get caught up in them. The flappy hand combo can stack up to several slaps in one go, and you might survive 1 or 2, but you won't survive many more. His big hop will definitely splatter you across the floor like Hangover Sick if it lands, but it's such a slow animation that it's very easy to avoid. The water scream is fine, I think. I don't remember remember it hitting me, so I have to assume that it doesn't do any damage. All in all, he's not so much of a problem as the run up to him, which has you pelting through the final leg of the Shrine of Amana, which on first exploration will probably leave you with less than the optimum number of Estus. I'm frustrated that you can't use his hide to make armor, considering it's completely impervious to attacks. You could just wear it like some enormous rotting foreskin and never die again. Just pelt around Dragonslayer, smelling more and more like a dead fish until the shopkeepers stop serving you. This is a key example of a boss whose run-up is way more savage than the fight itself. When I look back on my time with the Executioner's Chariot, I remember it being really horrible. And then I remember that the boss himself only took a couple of tries, but I died getting to him so much that the whole area before him ended up despawning. And let's not mention the bridge itself.
Oh!
The Red Phantom left such an impression on me, an ultra greatsword shaped one in fact, that I ended up dodging past him during my boss attempts, but I came back at the end of the game to beat him anyway. My salt was just that real. But anyway, yeah, the boss. You can either shoot him with arrows as he zooms by, or run up the length of the track, hiding in those little notches on the wall. It's a bit of an unpolished arena. Some of them have very broken collision, so you'll still take damage even if you're safely tucked inside. Once you're at the end of the track, you can pull a lever to lower the gate, which I can't believe the Undead Chapter didn't consider, since it's very plainly out in the open. Then you fight its horse. It's all a bit of a fever dream, honestly. And then I found out that he was optional, so that was great. The old Iron King has the same attitude to an unwanted visitor as Trevor Phillips has to a minor disagreement.
Fuck you! I'm gonna put you in the fucking ground, you laugh at me again!
Man, calm down.
If he just squatted in the lava and didn't engage you, I don't see how there's a single thing you could do to him. He'd be safe. Instead, this cantankerous fool lumbers over to you for a bout of fisticuffs and his fate is sealed. He literally does not know how to pick his battles. Despite his frustrating lack of common sense, he's one of my two favourite bosses of the game. His fight is extremely fun, capturing the essence of bosses from old 2D side-scrollers. He's huge, towering over you like some Tesco brand Satan, with these great big bat wings and goat horns. He's utterly ripped. You know, this guy has never had a slice of bread in his life. He captures that classic boss experience. His moves are so wonderfully generic and his telegraphs are so melodramatically clear. He sweeps the arena with his arms like a primary school kid wiping their whiteboard clean. He slams down his fists and then just waits for a few seconds so you can get some wax in, sometimes with added pyromancy. He's got fire breath and he's got lasers. Do I need to say more? My only critique is that his fight is not long enough. I need more of that soundtrack in my life. The Rotten and I go way back. You see, as every player knows, the Shrine of Winter opens if you return to it after lighting 4 primal bonfires, but some may not be aware that you can also open it after accumulating a certain number of souls. This makes every single boss before the Shrine of Winter technically optional, but if you, like myself, were inches away from attaining the Platinum Trophy and wanted to grind a single boss to save time over travelling to each primal bonfire, who would you choose? Well, I'm sure you can guess, or I wouldn't have mentioned this here. A frightening amalgamation of maddened corpses, fearful, screaming, crying, furious, ashamed at what they've become. This wretched, decomposing hive mind. Like a Reddit comment section, the Rotten doesn't appreciate your intrusion. Unlike a Reddit comment section, his moveset is very basic and not particularly harrowing. He's got a grab, an AoE, and a few horizontal and vertical melee swings with his cleaver. He is a heavy hitter and it's barely worthwhile trying to block his attacks, mainly because he'll follow with a flurry of more right afterwards, so it's best to be on your dodge and roll game instead. Oh yeah, and a lot of the floor is on fire for some reason. Maybe things just got a bit out of hand. I'll start the sentry off by saying I've not really had any problems with the Guardian Dragon, and haven't known many others to either. If you're playing the Scholar of the First Sin edition, you'll have had a demo run of this fight right at the start of the game back in Hyde's Tower of Flame, so he'll probably be a huge anti-climax considering the spectacle of his arena from the outside. Depending on your RNG, he can even be a little bit dull of an experience. During some of my attempts against him, he's just firmly rooted himself to the arena wall and shot fireballs at the centre of the room, very obviously nowhere near where I was stood. Literally, when this guy is flies off the ground, he has zero tracking. Like me attempting an FPS, he could not kill you if he tried. He's okay when he's on the floor too, he just stomps his feet like a toddler having a temper tantrum, but a really slow and deliberate one with plenty of time and room to get yourself out of the way. He also has next to no HP, so as long as you can keep him on the ground, this fight can be over in less than a minute. He's also a little teaser of an absolute cataclysm to come, but we'll get to that later. This fight really punishes careful defensive players, which, before I decided to just two-hand my weapon and roll my way through every conflict, was definitely my downfall here. Because if you take your time, you will be neck-deep in water before the Flexile Sentry is even down to half health. He needs a fluid, get it, playstyle. Fluid, like water. Alright, okay, fine, got you. Like most early game bosses, he's absolutely punishing to a player that doesn't understand stamina management. He attacks quickly and in multiple combos, then spins around so his conjoined twin can do the same. I often do Lucatiel's questline on my first playthrough, so we need to co-op him together, and then just head to Lost Bastille via the Pursuer on my second, so I've actually not fought him solo that many times. He's okay though, he's quite forgettable actually. I will proudly admit that I have no idea what the Giant Lord is doing. Just generally. He's just a pair of legs on screen, and most of his telegraphs are so vague, it's like trying to interpret the meaning of your niece's watercolour. Oh wow, that sweep was really lovely. Yeah, it came completely out of nowhere. Oh, that's so pretty. Oh, and is this you here doing a little stomp? Oh wow. We'll put this on the fridge so everyone can see it. Wow, well done. You get the point. He doesn't telegraph his attacks very clearly, so you'll randomly find yourself smashed to dust without ever really knowing why. This was definitely my #1 cause of death, just getting utterly obliterated by an errant kick. But I soon found out that as long as you stick between his feet, as long as he's not stomping, you can usually avoid this whole headache. Besides that, he's not too tough, and a lot of people even farm him for his souls. That's probably why he's so salty when you find him as the last giant aeons later, and you realise how naked he is. This fight is a really key example of a fight that is super easy if you have any points in ADP, but is stupidly hard without it. The old Dragonslayer is very quick and he fights with unlimited stamina, never needing to pause between attacks. You have to take your chances during his stance changes and wind downs and always keep on your toes, which is no easy request for a noob with only a few points in stamina. I had the same problem on my first attempt here as I did with the Dragon Rider, having had my HP drop so low that I couldn't survive a single hit. I was long out of effigies, so in the end I just restarted the game and did it better this time round. Still, his fight is really fast-paced and fun, and despite him being an optional boss guarding a pretty niche covenant, I typically make the decision to go and paddle him even though I don't really need to. I mean, the second you walk in to find this aged, edgy, hot topic Ornstein who smokes and lives in a society and hates his parents, you'll know that you're in for an absolute ride. Unless you're a fucking casual like me and you didn't play the first Dark Souls before you tried this game, so the reference went right over your head. The Duke's dear Freja offers a pretty straightforward fight. She stomps her little tootsie toes, she's a fire in her laser, and she has that mandible crunch which sounds like an excellent cereal, and the ability to constantly summon tiny spiders, which I reckon was a last-minute measure to try and make her more difficult, as without them the fight would be laughably easy. Besides her stomps, she can only attack from either of her heads, one on the front and one on the back, and spends most of the boss fight physically turning to face you or doing a weird swinging animation like those weird boat rides at amusement parks. If you let the spiders run loose, they can certainly overwhelm you, but don't mince my words here, she is still absolutely piss regardless. Although if you leave them alive, they don't despawn upon killing Freja, so they can still murder you straight afterwards, and you have to do the whole fight again, which is an unfortunate reality that I learned firsthand. On the original version of Dark Souls 2, she wasn't even the problem. Bengal's body was, lying quietly in wait for you by the primal bonfire after her boss fight, which would then give you the shock of your life when Aldia spawned in to talk your ear off about some fucking cycle of life and death. Get on your bike, mate. The only reason I've placed Aldia so high on the list is because I used the Throne of Want as my summon for the original Dark Souls 2, and therefore didn't have any DLC to farm for Sunlight Medals. He gets a huge health boost in co-op, and most people summon you for the Throne Watcher and Defender, only to then automatically trigger Nishandra, and if you're really unlucky, which you almost always will be, Aldia too. The awkward pause you get after Nishandra, where you just begin to relax, then suddenly this wrinkled bag of hellfire pops up out of the mud and starts slapping you with vines. Yeah, it's not good. It's a massive pain in the ass, because even if Aldia was the only fight you were summoned for, these players would just charge face first into every single attack. They'd always die during the Aldia fights, and you'd get kicked out without earning a single sunlight medal, not even for the 2 fights you'd won. So many times I'd scream at my TV as I watched my co-op compadre run face first into a rain of fire and get burnt to a crisp, tears streaming down my face as the screen fades to black, grieving my success as I'm booted back to my own game. The loss is truly indescribable. It's a reasonable loss too, honestly, you can't even blame them. His AoE is tricky business and his attacks hit very hard in co-op. He has these insane pillars of fire that do stupid damage, and being close to him inflicts constant burning damage, so there's a lot going on at any one time. I have no idea why they made him such a powerhouse in co-op, and I have no idea how to find out, so it's a mystery that will go on thus unsolved until the end of time. With that disclaimer out of the way, he's pips solo. Literally pips, so there's that. Alongside the old Iron King fight, Velstat's fight is really fun, and one of my 2 favourites in the base game. Velstat hits extremely hard. He wields this enormous bell-shaped hammer, or club, maybe, and as much as it memes to say it, the point of this fight is to not get hit. He's slow as fuck, and his combos are very predictable, but he has a deceptive range and an attack that involves him running at you with an overhead slam. He can even catch you on the backswing if you're camping behind him, a lesson most bosses in this game have taught you is a good idea thus far. He's fun to chase around, and I really enjoy every minute of this fight. I love that they bring him back later in the first DLC too. He's got this ranged magic attack too that most people won't see the true terror of, because it takes him so long to cast it and has such a serious telegraph, but if it hits you, you'll probably die. It's only ever happened to me once, but it was a bit of an eye-opener. Besides that, he buffs with dark magic in the second half of his fight, which is also super interesting. This guy is really cool for his lore alone. He's been sat there for eons, silent, stoic, watching over his king. He's not hollowed at all. In his opening cutscene, you can see that his face is still human, because his dedication keeps him alive, but his soul is dark, the same as Nashandra. Interesting, or at least I think it's interesting. My extended family at the table during last year's Christmas dinner didn't really get my enthusiasm. I swear I said the same thing about the Capra Demon, but honestly this fight with the Royal Rat Authority will go precisely one of 2 ways, and either way it'll only last a few seconds in total. In wave 1, you'll run in, get toxicked by the little rats, and get bullied to death by the big rat. In wave 2, you'll run in, kill the rats early, then spend the rest of the time chasing the larger rat round like a discount Sith. They hop the same way, attack the same way, hell, it even looks like a dog. No way you can convince me that the Royal Rat Authority is actually a rat. You could slap a post-it note reading rat on the last giant and it would probably be more convincing, but also definitely way more demeaning, and he's been through enough already, so maybe let's not resort to name calling. Unlike the Capra Demon, this arena is actually big enough to swing a cat in. Not that you'd want to. I always wondered what someone was thinking to invent a phrase like that, but it's good to get a bit of space when you're airing out your tilt. And if you're unlucky here, you will tilt. Got to give the pursuer the credit he deserves. He was a run ender for me on my first playthrough. As I've said before, I was fucked, charging between the Forest of Fallen Giants and Hyde's Tower of Flame with about a pube of max health, deliberating between falling on the Dragonslayer's sword, the Flexile Sentry's dual swords, or the pursuer's sword, and I eventually just put the game down for several months. It was easier that way, easier to forget, to move on. But there was a part of me that couldn't, that lingered on this memory of Dark Souls like a hoodie pocket snagged on a door handle, dragging me back so hard that I collide with the bathroom wall. I have no idea how I was so bad at games back then, but I just staggered over to him with zero knowledge of stamina management, iframes, dodging, rolling, blocking, parrying, not being greedy, not ignoring telegraphs, so you can be sure I was absolutely slapped through the Forest of Fallen Giants like a marble in a drain pipe. No idea how I was coughed out on the other side, but I can assure you that I was in a bad way. Once I came back with the knowledge of ADP and a preference for two-handing, this fight was a breeze. I found the trick is to not try and block. Just be free. Roll around. Walk around him. Let him be aggressive and just smack his ass a few times as he rolls on by. If you try to play defensively, he will out-stamina you and cut you down. He's a lot of fun to return to. I guess that's why they added so many of him in Scholar of the First Sin. Like most of the women in my life, I spent the better part of our conflict cowering in the corner of the room with the lights off, and I couldn't find the key for the doors. I thought it would just give the room a lovely ambient feel if I turned the lights on, but apparently it weakens her? Unconfirmed. And I can't be bothered to Google it, so I'll just chalk it up as one of life's mysteries. Also, if you're trying to get Lucatiel's set, you've got the added excuse of summoning help for the sake of the fashion souls, but we all know you're doing it because you're scared of facing this raggedy bitch alone, and we do understand. I mean, I am exaggerating. She's not too bad solo on New Game, but in New Game Plus, she gets these 2 pyromancers in and it becomes such a circus. It's like going to hang out with your best mate and find out she's invited 2 randomers along. They're just flinging fire around and doing an annoying amount of work. She's meleeing like a motherfucker, and you're just feeling a bit awkward and overwhelmed. The Lost Sinner can be majorly frustrating because she's so quick. She jumps in, hits you, then backflips out like Batman on acid. You expend all your energy chasing her around whilst also avoiding her quick attacks. Honestly, for a Primal Bonfire boss that's usually fought first in a playthrough, this woman is beefy. So, I always make a point to leave the Dark Lurker until the absolute last. Every time I intend to fight them, I make sure I do absolutely everything possible in-game, and then, when on the precipice of New Game Plus, I swallow my pride and go to speak to old Wheels McGee. I can't tell you how much of a difference the DLC makes. The first time I attempted the Dark Lurker on the original version of the game, I was not ready. Magic and pyromancy coming at me from every angle, delivered with a kiss and a slap on the bum by a boss that can split in half and fly? Yeah, alright then mate. Oh, and I have to spend a human effigy per attempt, a finite resource that is extremely difficult to source once I've exhausted all the available ones in game, and I can die on the way there in the really silly chasm of old map against these crazy red phantoms that all have to be killed before I can proceed. I can assure you that they had long since despawned before I finally claimed my first victory. Honestly, I wasted nearly 20 effigies on my first attempt. I think I had 4 left by the time I won, with no idea how I'd source more should my font run dry. It was extremely stressful and it made me really angry, to be perfectly frank. I hated the Dark Lurker. Then I came back after 3 DLCs on Scholar of the First Sin, walked in and wrecked them in a matter of seconds. What a difference just a few levels and a bit of experience made. How obviously they were weak to magic and pyromancies themselves. It was a delicious dessert to a succulent playthrough, and I like them quite a bit now.
Oh my god, stop bro, I'm stuck! Can you help me?
If, after my first go with the Dark Lurker, you'd have told me I'd one day be rating Scorpioness Nazca higher on the list, I'd have assumed you were pulling my leg, and I'd have called you a knob. But now that the Dark Lurker is an established bit of wet crepe paper, I can see how meaty Nazca really is. I've only ever been killed by her once or twice, mainly because I tried to keep my distance from her and only summoned the ire of her ranged magic attacks, but she actually has a weirdly high amount of HP. I'm pretty sure that she has more HP than the old Iron King. She has this cool gimmick where she goes underground and you have to go and stand on a bit of concrete so she can't track your movement. I like that, it's pretty cool. Once she's scuttling around on the sand like an angry crab, charge in and melee her directly to draw out her most counterable attacks. She's got some great ones that leave her open for several seconds at a time, so you do get plenty of hits in before she composes herself to try again. I had a fair amount of trouble with Nishandra until I realised I could run away, bait her ranged laser attack, her only ranged attack, and then sprint back in, punch her a few times, sprint away, and repeat. Her scythe melee attacks are surprisingly lethal, and a point-blank hit will almost always result in death. A combo is 100% assured death, blocking or not. Plus, she has this absolutely fierce AoE, but it's got a very clear telegraph, so it's easy to duck out of the way. Unless of course you're another player who's summoned me for help, in which case you'll probably tuck yourself in goodnight under the hem of her dress and just wait for death to come. I mean, she's a skeleton, wearing a dress made of skeletons. If you think about it, that's the most horrifying boss of all. Imagine a woman wearing a dress made of lots of limbs and heads all tangled together. To be honest, I wouldn't be surprised if an early Lady Gaga had tried something similar. She's also got these massive balls that inflict curse on you if you get too close to them, and you can hit them to get them to despawn. I was also told you can roll through them, but I've never managed to pull that off. I know this is going to be another unpopular opinion in an apparent sea of unpopular opinions, but I found Alana, the Squalid Queen, to have the funnest boss fight of the DLC. Not the best boss fight by any means, but definitely the most fun for me, which she probably won by default considering both the Burnt Ivory King and Fume Knight's fights were a bit janky, and Alon's fight was hugely tainted by the run-up to him. I just love it. You find the woman who has been ominously singing throughout your exploration of the entire city of Shulver. She's this horrifying, wretched magic user who spins around and immediately ushers in your doom. She's got some cool attacks, but mainly the ability to summon Velstadt, another one of my favourites, so it's basically a double whammy of fun for me. Her theme is really good too. It's this shambolic cacophony of notes that have just been lobbed onto paper and spat out in musical form, and it really adds to the fight. All of the DLCs have amazing music. The arena is also very subtly beautiful. The big rock carving of statues does wonders for my lore boner. She's also an excellent place to farm sunlight medals. I struggled to find a summon for Fume Knight, and I was wary of being used as a Lois soul whore with the Burnt Ivory King, so I slapped my sign down in front of Alana and had 30 medals by the end of the day. Result: Mytha does not find herself so high in this list for her sins in New Game and New Game Plus, but rather the absolute devil she becomes in New Game Plus 2. Not unlike Medusa's whole deal, Mytha the Baneful Queen becomes a cold stone wall blocking your way to the Iron Keep in the second New Game Plus cycle. She's absolutely farcical to solo up until this point, with minimal health and absolutely measly attacks. Yeah, you might die if you're not careful, or if, like any new player who doesn't have an experienced player breathing down their neck, you fail to address the elephant-sized poison pool in the room. But even if you do forget to do it or try to do it without, you'll notice she's not spectacularly hard. On the whole, she's quite a forgettable experience. Mytha earns her place here because she's the only boss in the game, maybe even the series, that grew so insidiously between New Game Plus cycles. She's a serious beast. Unless you bring the trump card, of course. Jester Thomas is the Black Iron Tarkus of Dark Souls 2, capable of soloing Mytha all the way into New Game Plus. He is a beastly pyromancer with an awesome get-up, and he and I swung in there like two buddy cops at the crescendo of an action movie. Good thing too, most summonable NPCs become completely ineffectual in New Game Plus, but Jester Thomas and his iron onesie will always remain the MVP of any fight he assists in. One word: boring. Okay, next on the list is no, I'm kidding. No, now a few words. Basically, this guy has a huge hidden gimmick that you'll probably never know about unless you were told. There are 5 giant souls available in the main game. The Ancient Dragon has one, there are 3 throughout Giant Memories and the Forest of Fallen Giants, and a giant in the Black Gulch has another. The more of these you physically possess at one time, the weaker Vendrick becomes. If you spend them, they no longer count. You need at least 4 to have even a chance of doing any damage to him, or you'll be there for a long time. The main problem is that you need to kill the Ancient Dragon for the final one, which can be an absolute pain in the arse to fight unless you get good at RNG. The problems with Vendrick is that he's so fucking dull that you'll probably lose concentration while fighting him, at least once or twice, and end up getting brained. He's got about 3 different attacks, all of them extremely slow but very strong, and a direct shot from most will kill you or more than halve your health. I think at the most I could take 2 hits from him. He's also got a galactic amount of HP. The fight can drag on for well over 10 or 20 minutes depending on how many giant souls you've collected, something you're never implied to need, and he can send you crawling back to the nearest bonfire the second you stop paying attention. He's only difficult in the sense that he waits for you to fall asleep before he deals the final blow. Like a bitter spouse who's looking for their chance to flee with the kids, he'll wait as long as he needs to get you to drop your guard. Now this is a dragon fight. Kalameet was the first dragon boss I fought in Dark Souls, and at the time I thought it was an insanely cool boss fight. In retrospect, it was a very mechanical fight with very janky animations and pretty untrustworthy hitboxes. It was fun, but not as fun as Sin. Sin, the slumbering dragon, soars around the arena, and it just feels so cool and intense, and it's just a scale of a boss fight I'd never experienced before. He even skids across the floor when he lands as though the momentum of his sheer mass is carrying him forward, whereas Kalameet just kind of lands in a completely vertical sense, like he's been clicked and dragged between 2 locations. He's also fairly unique in that his body has a corrosive effect, so if you're accustomed to hitting beasts from behind, you filthy thing, you'll soon find your weapon completely broken and unusable. I had to switch weapons during his boss fight once, which was the most stressful thing I've ever done. FromSoft knew well enough by now that beast bosses are very easy to counter if you just squat behind them or beneath them, and Sin was a clear response to this. You have to face him head on. I actually wanted to farm him for sunlight medals, but his corrosion ability really got on my nerves, so I farmed Alana instead. Look, it needs to be said, these guys are really hard solo. The first few times I played Dark Souls 2, I was absolutely hopeless without a summon. There's some magic user woman you can call in to help, and it's like back in the day where you'd ask your dad to come in and do a level of Crash Bandicoot for you. You can just sort of sit back and watch while she gets upset on your behalf. Solo, it's another story. The first guy is okay enough with a bit of dodge rolling. He just has a few attacks hit just a second or so later than you expect, so you usually roll right into them and have a third of health shaved off your health bar. It's when the other two get involved that things really take a turn. I've seen some streamers pull a trick whereby you stay on the first platform and make the Sentinels fall off the platform by baiting certain moves in certain positions, but I was never able to maintain it for more than a few minutes without falling off myself, so often I have to just fight them both on the ground. They're not necessarily fast, but they have insane range, and often catch you unawares with attacks you didn't realise could reach you. They also occasionally leap into the air, out of your sight, and come slamming down on your head. It's easy to roll to avoid this attack, but you need to keep your eyes on both as much as humanly possible so that you don't get utterly blindsided and obliterated. The worst attack is the spin to win by far. They just start careening around in circles, just fast enough that rolling backwards will probably land you in more trouble than it's worth. They'll always deplete your stamina if you block too, so you just have to hope you're on the other side of the room when they start the attack. I guess that's a good strategy for most attacks really, just don't be there when it happens. I had so much trouble with the Looking Glass Knight on my first few attempts that I ended up appealing to the Dark Souls 2 Reddit page for help with a PS3 version of a game that was later hugely improved on with a later release in 2019. Yeah, I didn't really get any responses. While I waited for my help to arrive, I tried and tried against this knight. I can't remember how many attempts it took honestly, but my main concern was that I needed Benhart of Jugo to survive and he just kept dying. I needed him to live until the end so that I can inherit his equipment, but he would just run in, get pinned against a wall, and get paddled to death by that guy's massive mirror. Half the time I'd be getting on really well, killing this fellow in my own time, and then Benhart would die, so I'd have to homeward bone or die trying, and spend another effigy just getting him back. An interesting gimmick with this fight is that you become waterlogged as you play due to the rain, which means that the lightning attacks this big nerd employs become more and more powerful, and at full waterlog you will die in one hit. This creates an interesting element of RNG. The longer you let the fight go on, the luckier you need to be with the attacks he deals, and the better you need to be at dodging the ones he picks. I beat him after many hours and never struggled with him again, probably because I didn't need Benny Boy's set after that. Then a few weeks later I checked back on Reddit and found someone had finally offered to help me. That's just how these things go, I guess. Sir Elon has the unfortunate association in my mind with the route to his boss arena. It's one of the co-op areas introduced in Dark Souls 2's DLCs, so naturally it's stacked with bitch enemies that aggro on you from every available angle immediately. Most of the people I spoke to about this area ran at it so many times that all the enemies eventually just despawned, and they were free to finally jog through and find Elon without the catcalling and harassment.
Oh no.
When I played on stream, I was genuinely down to my last gram of patience. I just tripped and fallen down Broom Tower, lumbering into every trap and stumbling into every gank ambush the entire way, and I was not in the mood for patiently approaching my problems. So a couple of brave adventurers came along for the ride. A brave, reckless, sacrificial ride. We just sprint through, absolutely cheese it through this big hall of salamanders as enemies sprung at us from every corner. One ally would go down, the other would be swarmed. Run! They'd scream as the hordes of Alon Knights overwhelmed them. Save yourself! They'd be dead before I even reached the boss fog, which is actually probably a really good thing considering it meant I'd not have to deal with Alon's extra HP and damage. Alon himself is fun, but fast, just zooming around with his crazy infinite stamina. His moveset's suspiciously similar to the Smelter Demon's, which I love. He's got a lot of cool moves, but none cooler than when he impales you on his sword from half a mile away and sucks the life energy out of your screaming, wriggling corpse to buff himself with. If you let him get away with that, the fight is genuinely as good as finished, because he will just kill you. Although, if you embarrass him by getting him down to a certain percentage of health without taking any damage yourself, he falls on his own sword, which is perhaps the whingiest rage quit I've ever seen. I couldn't tell you what percentage it requires though, because I'm shit at Dark Souls and I never managed to find out firsthand. It took a while for me to get over my fear of the Smelter Demon and finally solo him for the first time. As with the Lost Sinner and the Flexile Sentry, the link this guy has to Lucatiel's story, and therefore her set, makes him a perfect candidate for fulfilling one of the 3 summon requirements for her. You can pretend you're summoning her for quest purposes when it's actually just because you're really scared.
Clean up this room before I fuck your ass!
Don't you mean fuck your ass up?
No! I'ma fuck your ass!
Also, by the time you get to the Smelter Demon, you're probably in a worse mood than a middle-aged woman hearing that gay marriage happened somewhere once. Iron Keep is an insane gauntlet of foes and a genuine baptism by fire, literally. There are loads of Alon Knights here and they have stupid line of sight and will aggro on you from 100 meters away. I know that the Shrine of Amana is infamous for its difficulty, but having played the original Dark Souls 2 and Scholar of the First Sin, Shrine of Amana has paled in comparison to the stupidity of Iron Keep, and the Iron Keep has lava. So yeah, you usually wind up in the Smelter Demon's arena while desperately running away from other enemies, because the door looks really small on this very tiny outcropping of land, and you never assume that there'll actually be a boss behind it, considering there are tens of fog gates in the game that don't actually lead to a boss confrontation. Then he cleaves you in two and you have to go back to the start, and don't get me started on his fire effect. I don't think I'm unique in what I'm about to say, but when I first tried fighting Aava, the king's pet, I didn't realise she could be visible. I had my ass handed to me so badly during this fight that I was sent packing to the last bonfire within a minute. I was then sympathetically guided to the eye thing by chat. Thank you, chat. Aava is kind of a forgettable boss. She's got a very nice design, and as an entity, she is really cool, but I don't remember much about her at all. Except in the back of my mind, I feel like I repressed the memory of some frustrating hitboxes. Like, she'd shift her weight or move weirdly and I'd randomly take a chunk of damage. This is a key example of a boss I didn't find to be especially polished. None of the bosses of the third DLC do seem to be, and as a result, I can't say I enjoyed the fight. She's mostly melee, but even when you're squatting basically underneath her, she can still use these magic missile things that you won't be able to see because she herself impedes most of the camera, so you often don't notice she's cast anything until it hits you. A truly middle-of-the-road boss, honestly. Her difficulty is inflated by my memory of fighting her while she was invisible, and her propensity to randomly damage me by sheer will of the RNG gods. But in reality, she's like any other cat, and you'd probably have better luck with a spray bottle. I don't think it's possible to approach Dark Souls 2 Scholar of the First Sin in this internet age without hearing about the Fume Knight. For some people, he was probably a massive draw, and the fight doesn't disappoint. Well, mostly. Fume Knight's fight is split into two phases. During the first, he dual wields this enormous sword. He's fast during this fight and keeps you on your toes. You have to react quickly and attack when you can. His second phase completely changes tone. What most players don't realise is that he completely slows down. The pace of this fight slows to a crawl, a very deadly crawl, like a baby with a chainsaw, and many of his attacks, such as the weird wide burning swing, will probably eviscerate you depending on your build. Help me. You have to approach him completely differently in each phase, and it's hard to force yourself to slow down and relax in that second phase. I was really worried about the Fume Knight, but had the advantage of fighting him just before the end of a stream. So I put a few attempts into him, the stream ended, and when I returned 2 days later, I'd had time for the fight to settle in my mind. I'd had some distance, and now I was ready. When I returned, I beat him on the second or third try. The Fume Knight, or Raim, as his real name is a big fat shame in Dark Souls 2, being that he is probably one of the most interesting characters in the game, having been at the centre of all major conflicts and weird romances of Dark Souls 2. But by the time you show up to meet him, he's so far gone that he's in no fit state for a post-match interview.
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
Imagine creating Ornstein and Smough, one of the most infamous boss fights of all time, perfectly balanced as all things should be, and then a few years later shitting out the Throne Watcher and Defender. How could you regress in your insights so badly as to take something that worked fantastically well and just not do it anymore? Tweedledee and Tweedledum are ass, because unlike the slow and heavy Smough and quick and nimble Ornstein, Watcher and Defender are both roughly the same speed and size. Watcher attacks a bit faster, sure, and she can zoom at you from mid-range, but the Defender will be right behind her. It wouldn't be so much of a sin if there was something to break up aggro. Instead, you just kite these losers around a big circle and occasionally take a couple hits at them. You'll almost always end up trading damage because it's honestly just a boring slog, and you'll almost always end up dying because they both do silly damage. Especially the Watcher. Her hitboxes are a bit funny, especially once she has imbued her sword with lightning, and you'll just seemingly be taking random damage as he zips all over the place. If one of them goes down, the other one stops to pray and heal them, and honestly that's your best chance to get in there and start carving up that mess of a codependent relationship. I don't enjoy this fight. The headline reads, arguably a solo boss at the end of a gauntlet explicitly designed for co-op play, and that is the sole reason why I have never soloed this guy. Now we're going to take a quick foray through some honourable mentions, being that the next few bosses were only beaten through co-op. The DLC of Dark Souls 2 introduces these neat little areas specifically for co-op. You know you've arrived in one of them when you find these little stone panels on the floor. Players can leave their summon signs on matching panels outside of their respective DLC and be summonable to any area with these panels. These areas are usually crammed with enemies. I guess the only way FromSoft knew to increase the danger was just by increasing the number of enemies. It's extremely hard to get through them without just despawning all the enemies over the course of tens of attempts, or you can just bolt through, I suppose. So yeah, I'm sad he wasn't in the main DLC himself, honestly. It would have been nice to fight him one-on-one. He's a cool callback to the main game version in that he's got the main game's moveset, but with certain delays to very familiar attacks that often mean you have to learn them all over again, and cool subtle differences in, for example, his magic effect, which means that the fire resist you're accustomed to using will be useless. He's hard as balls though. With 2 companions summoned, he would consistently kill me in a single hit, so I ended up just hanging back, too worried that I'd be annoying my co-op partners by dying for the 8th time, which meant I was too hesitant to properly get involved in the fight. Just because Lud and Zalin can be outnumbered doesn't mean they're not arseholes. I went here in a team of 3 and got wiped multiple times. Not ever really by the run-up, although yes, it was terrible, but mostly by the cats themselves. They've got similar problems to Aava in that their hitboxes feel a bit unpolished and the fight itself seems a bit unrefined. I get the overall impression that the 3rd DLC was a bit rushed in development too. All the boss fights feel a bit janky, a bit unpolished, and this is a good example. I feel like a different boss was intended to go here, but they just ran out of time, so they slapped in 2 versions of Aava and just let it play out, similar to the double Sanctuary Guardian fight in Dark Souls 1, only it's janky as fuck and feels a million times more frustrating. I don't have much to say here that I didn't have to say about Aava, considering it's just the same fight, but double. Honestly, whose idea was this? I want them fired immediately. This fight is perhaps the biggest bullshit moment in the entire game, and considering this DLC has some of my favourite bosses of the series, I can assure you that this was surprisingly easy to admit. Grave Robber, Varg, and Sarah are the epitome of bullshit NPC invaders. They have absolutely unbreakable poise, boss level HP, unlimited stamina, and aren't slowed by water, meaning that they can follow you to the ends of the earth and beyond, bonking you on the head the entire way. You're just ganked by 3 hackers who don't need to follow the same in-game laws as you. Imagine if Jesus Christ used his water walking to backstab noobs. This is the level we're talking here. I took 1 run at these bastards and died horribly and immediately, and then decided to summon from there on out, at which point they almost actually became too easy. This fight is fully intended to be fought co-op, except no one puts their summon down for this boss because it's shit, so most people end up skipping it anyway. I know that they can be beaten solo with a lot of kiting and careful movement, but who wants to do that? This boy seems to be From's only ever attempt at making a raid boss, thankfully. The lovely thing about Ancient Dragon is that unless you're some kind of mega build, everything he does is going to kill you, and everything you do to him is barely going to leave a scratch. This guy is thankfully optional, unless you want an easy time at killing Vendrick, and even then I'd rather just not bother. Also, I do feel a bit bad for killing him. He just wants to be left alone with a good book and some celebrations. I know there's a strategy wherein you can slot yourself between the toes on his back foot, and in theory, stop him from flying into the air to rain fiery death down on your head, but I never actually managed to get it to work. I'd be chipping away at him for ages, fulfilling my life dream of being a little nugget of toe jam, and then RNG would randomly take a turn and he'd suddenly fly in the air and set me on fire. I ended up having to summon for him, and it took 3 of us, 1 keeping the aggro centered on themselves, and 2 of us to actually damage him, to eventually bring this big bastard down. Okay, now we're back to the non-co-op fights. The following bosses were soloed. Thank you for your patience. Yep, I just can't do it. I honestly barely scraped past these guys in New Game, but in New Game Plus and beyond, they are basically impossible, so I just gave up. Like Mytha, they suddenly adopt the craziest power boost and become winged demons of death, sowing despair across my sad fields. They're functionally similar to the Belfry Gargoyles from Dark Souls 1, except up to 6 can spawn at a time. They're more aggressive, they're faster, you have less space to maneuver in, and they all spawn at full health, whereas Gargoyle number 2 spawns at half health in the first game. You can more or or less manage it in New Game, but with New Game Plus attack and HP, they are crazy formidable. When one drops below 50% health, it starts to breathe fire, so if you try to whittle all of them down equally, you'll eventually just be swallowed by this inferno. Depleting their health also causes more to spawn, so you can very easily be overwhelmed if you're trying to play it safe and attack only when the opportunity arises. Almost counterproductively, you need to focus on one at a time, which takes really long. It's extremely hard to summon for this fight because it's at the end of an online PvP area guarded by the Bellkeepers, so most people who summon end up being invaded and bullied into the ground, so you often have to take them on solo, at least in the original version. I've no idea whether they added summons in Scholar. It's a shame because in New Game Plus they guard the Covetous Silver Serpent Ring +2, which is really useful for grinding for items. Weirdly, I struggled with the Burnt Ivory King's fight a lot for my first several attempts because I was actually killing his entourage too fast. On landing in this incredible arena, having plummeted to the depths of hell to put this mighty warrior out of his misery, you are faced by the Lois Knights that followed him into the chaos, only to be consumed alongside him.
Oh, for fuck's sake!
If you've been diligent in your exploration and found all the unburnt Lois souls on your travels, they'll join you and wage war in this final confrontation. It is a bit bullshit though. If you beat the knights too fast, one of them will spawn much too late, i.e. exactly when the Ivory King spawns. If you've got a knight left over, he might be able to help you out, but honestly the Burnt Ivory King is such a burden by himself that this very minor advantage in his favour can tip the scales. He's a very difficult fight, and not necessarily in a good way, and I found myself getting frustrated for all the wrong reasons. His awesome lightsaber has some weird hitbox, and I would take a lot of damage from random swings that didn't seem to make contact with me at all. No matter how carefully I rolled, I remember raging pretty hard. I think this fight needed just a little bit more polish. This is the third time I've said it with this video, but this DLC felt extremely unfinished, and the boss fights did not feel as polished as those in the previous two, almost as though they ran out of time when refining it. I beat the Burnt Ivory King after about 10 tries, but even in retrospect I don't feel particularly proud of the fight. Something at its core deeply disappointed me, and having walked into the DLC very excited for an all-out battle in actual hell, I felt dissatisfied and was honestly just glad it was over. Banging soundtrack though. Oh, that was a long one. Thanks for sticking through it. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'd be interested to hear your favourites in the comments. It was a lot of fun writing this, and I, as always, appreciate the feedback that I'm getting, so thank you for those of you who respond with feedback. Thank you to my patrons for your ongoing support, and to McSmooth for the masterful edit. I couldn't have done it without you. On a final note, I'm sorry if my shit choices didn't coincide with your own. I'm a weak moron, and I don't know how to play games, so that's on me. I mean, I guess you could tell that the moment I told you that Dark Souls 2 is my favourite, but I guess you could just rest assured in the fact that my list was crafted from a place of love. It's a good game. I recommend it.